pieces are known and understood and designed to support.
Thank you, Coleman. Very good. Let's go to Jörn first, and then we go to Daniel, and then Latin can move us to the next step here. Jörn.
Yeah, just on MiG-29 questions. Does this data link and stuff, is that what's going on with the upgrades in Poland now before they send more? Will they be lifted to the same level as whatever they've been doing with the Ukrainian MiG-29s? And do we know anything about spare parts and stuff? There's been rumors that they've gotten spare parts from Poland already, but now that they're getting whole MiG-29s, is there hope that they can get like loads of spare parts and engines and stuff that can really help the also existing Ukrainian MiG-29 fleet? Thanks.
Latin, you're going to have to take this.
I'm going to take it, and I'll take that question, and probably Goldman can back me up on some of this. But Jörn, you bring up a very important point, because to begin with, there has been some speculation about whether or not there has been some work done on these MiG-29s in the past year. Zero confirmation of that, and nothing concrete to go on. But of course, it is entirely possible. And part of the reason I say that is because I'm not sure about the Slovakian upgrade program, but I was in touch with somebody from Poland last week, and he shared with me some information in Polish that indicated that there was a second phase to that upgrade that was never that they never went to. They only did the level of equipment fit that we've been discussing, and that second level would have included the integration of a Western radar. And this goes to Goldman's point that if you put the infrastructure in place for it, then that facilitates or makes it easier to then take the next step forward and put in, for example, a Western radar. No indication of which radar they would have gone with, but then we also have the other part of this picture, which is the Israeli offer to upgrade Ukrainian MiG-29s in around the 2019 timeframe. That would have involved using their own indigenous radars, which the Israelis produce excellent combat. They don't currently produce any combat aircraft, but their avionics company ELTA produces some excellent radars, which they actively market to retrofit into existing legacy aircraft like the MiG-29. So almost for sure that was going to involve installing one of their multi-mode radars, a 2032 or 2052 electronically scanned radar, both of which are very capable. I'm just throwing stuff out here, Jörn, because this is when you open up this issue of what can be done with these MiG-29s, you can't help but look at these different scenarios. And you have the scenario of there was a MiG-29 upgrade in Romania that was canceled, but that also had reached a pretty advanced engineering stage. Would have also involved installing an Israeli radar. And the Romanians did go ahead with putting in one of those multi-mode radars, a 2032, into their MiG-21s, and some of their MiG-21s, not all of them. And some of those MiG-21s with that radar are now being retired. So they've kept a few of them because of the war. But I got to wonder, could there be a connection there? Could they pull these radars and try to integrate them? I mean, all possible, because the fastest way that I know of to integrate an AMRAAM into a MiG-29 would be to put in an Israeli radar. They're designed to be put into that airframe. Go ahead, Goldman.
Yeah, so that could, in theory, make them able to fire the AMRAAM missile.
AMRAAM will fire from a MiG-29, as far as I know, under two circumstances. They find a way to integrate it into the existing Soviet radar, which, again, I'm not a radar tech, but I think that's a reach. Goldman, we maybe speak more to that. He knows more of the avionics side of it. It's either that or install a Western compatible radar like the ELTA, the Israeli radars, which are compatible with AMRAAM, and as well as some of their own beyond visual range missiles, which are fantastic. But that idea is not pie in the sky. There were programs up to very recent, the 2019 offer of ELTA and Israel Aircraft Industries to upgrade the Ukrainian 29s. These things have been paper projects. Actually, the Romanian one was more than a paper project. They had moved ahead with prototypes. So it's not that much. It's not that big a reach. And whether or not that's the direction it'll go in, we have no way of saying, but it is possible.
But that would, if they decide to do that, that would still be an upgrade that would take months, right? It's not just some wiring and then you're done.
No, that's software, and that's a big deal. Potentially a big deal. I don't, it depends on how much engineering's already been done. It's always hard with things like radars. Just you can have cascading. You can have cascading kind of impacts of trying to put something like a radar in, into an existing application. They're usually designed for the application. There's, the aircraft and the radar are usually designed together to work together, because you have to manage power, you have to manage heat, you have to manage the radome that's on the front of it if it's different. All these things are potentially different. I don't know. I'm just saying all the things that come to mind to me are related to the facilities of the aircraft, right? Is the power quality good enough? Is the rate, is the heat, a better radar? Does it generate more heat? If it generates more heat, then you need more ECS to cool the radar in order to keep it alive, because electronics don't like to overheat, right? It's all those kind of cascading effects on the basic aircraft that I suspect is why a lot of people start these things but then don't finish, because they find out all the other things that are affected by this, right? And that's just getting the radar in the aircraft and functioning. And then there's a big software job in order to get the data from the radar to the missile, because if you don't get data from the radar to the missile, then the missile, you're not taking advantage of the ability for the missile to be able to have longer range, right? You got to be able to transfer data from the radar to the missile in order to make the missile effective. So I suspect in all these cases, it's the cascading effect on other systems of getting the radar in the aircraft that makes it so cost prohibitive. I would bet that, because just hanging the radar and plugging it in is not the issue. It's all those other things that tend to crop up that cause you to change. Now you're changing your generators. If you need more power, you need to change your generators. If you need more cooling because you're generating more heat, then you're changing your ECS. Now you're drawing more power off the engine, and does the engine have power to give, right? These things typically, when you design the aircraft the first time, you're not putting margin in your ECS system, or margin in your power system, or margin in your engine system. Now you have to figure out how to live with less of those on other things. Like it cascades. It can very easily cascade into the rest of the aircraft to try and get these systems in the aircraft when you're trying to apply them. It can be done. It all can be done. It just means that other things need to change in order to make the radar effective.
Good. Goldman, totally point taken. You're the expert on this. My only point would be that because the Israelis have done work on this, I think the engineering side of it is probably in place, right?
Yeah, that's right. So it's a known thing. That's a good first step, because then it's not a surprise when all of a sudden, that you have to change your power system to support a new radar, right? It's a known, whether
they know that
having it known is the first step, right?
Yeah, they know it's doable. Then it would seem like I don't know if cost is a factor, but then if it happens, time, yeah, because then typically the way those upgrades are done is those airframes are shipped to the facilities in Israel, and they spend months there getting refitted and tested and ready to send back. It's a long process. So that's something.
Absolutely. It's probably new wire harnesses and new. What are the chances that the inputs and outputs are identical between just from a wiring perspective? Very unlikely. Right. So now you're breaking into the wire. It can be done. There's no doubt it can be done. It's just time.
So this brings us back to what I think is the fundamental point about any MiG-29 transfer, assuming they are essentially legacy MiG-29s to Ukraine. they, even if they are only in their legacy form with Soviet systems, they are still incredibly useful and valuable to the
Absolutely.
Ukrainians, right? The when everybody sees these raids that the Russians mount with the cruise missiles and drones, there are MiG-29s that are flying combat air patrols further back in defense of critical infrastructure and civilian population. And the MiG-29 fleet is pressed right now between attrition and the multiple taskings that have been put on it since the war started, not just air defense, but this suppression of enemy air defense. Extra airframes, and we know they have the pilots, extra airframes are critical at this point. And it's not what they ideally want. They could have had F-16s by now if the decision had been made earlier. It wasn't. Full stop. That's it. Let's move forward. So this is critical right now. And like, yeah, I know, Goldman, you're on the same page with that. It's definitely what a good move right now. So what I'm looking for is in the next hours or days is let's get a better fix on numbers on what's coming, because there was that reference yesterday to several countries, and I don't think we've seen any daylight on that yet.
Yeah. And I just wanted to go, not to go back too far, but to comment on the two-seaters. The two-seaters are important because I just want to make sure everybody understands that, like, they're quote unquote training aircraft, right? That's what they typically use them for. But if a pilot takes a month off to go on vacation, his first flight back is not in a single seater. It's in a two-seater with somebody else, right? So the two-seaters kind of go with the fleet. They're not something you can give up when you're done training new pilots, right? Because that's that's the secondary role they fill, is when a pilot hasn't flown for a while, then their first couple flights are usually in a two-seater with somebody else that's been flying. Right? At least that's the way they do it in the West. I mean, you're never really flying by yourself when you've not flown for a few weeks even sometimes.
Right. Thank you, Goman. Let's go to Daniel, and then we can go back to Jörn, and then our trash panda is finally out of the bin. Daniel.
Yeah, I have a short, brief breaking news in a different subject. Is that okay? Just very short.
Yeah, go for it.
The Swedish, it was Denjon that gave me sort of a heads up on that. The Swedish government has now decided how many archers they're going to send to Ukraine. And it's a little bit of a disappointment because they are sending 8 of them. And the remaining 14 of those that are available are going to the UK as gap fillers for the AS-90s that they have already sent to Ukraine. So in a way, it is good because it has sort of made it possible for UK to send as many artillery pieces that they have. On the other hand, I would have preferred to see it the other way around, 8 to the UK and 14 to Ukraine. But yeah, 8 is better than nothing.
All right. Yeah, it's very confusing. Why does Britain really need 14 guns right now? I think it's an evaluation program, at least in part, for future purchases. Remember, these are Bofors guns, but they're manufactured by BAE Hägglunds, and the transfer of some of the IP could be quite easy and quite straightforward. Not to mention the usual close cooperation between Sweden and Britain on armaments of late. NLAWs are a good example, I think. So there's a good chance now that the UK might be going all the way in on Archers as their next howitzer. Just a guess, not a bad one. Jörn, these used to be Norwegian, the ones that are going all over the place, but you decided against them because you didn't realize when you were first ordering them that yes, it's a wheeled vehicle and it can't go up a 70-degree slope, which is also covered in ice. And apparently that was then a deal breaker. And they were late.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter anymore because we should all send everything to Ukraine. Stop with this British stuff and hoarding that stuff. We don't need that. We'll deal with that later. Send it to Ukraine. My hand was going back to the MiG-29s. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because as you said, Latin, there's nothing confirmed. So now we're just speculating. But in theory, could Could the Israelis have been tasked with upgrading these MiG-29s already? Could they have done that in Poland, or would that had become public in any way? Could it have been done in secret, or is that such a massive undertaking that we would have heard about it by now?
First of all, on the Israeli front, I stand corrected. I have a good source that I'm in touch with. Bea, if you're listening, please come up and share your knowledge. He knows a lot about Israeli avionics, and he was telling me that at least the ELTA 2032 is not integrated with AMRAAM, although apparently it's a software issue, so it could be figured out. In answer to your question, Jörn, it's entirely possible. I mean, if a program if an operator wants to conduct a program in secrecy, I think for the most part you can. You keep the aircraft in a secure hangar and or facility, and appropriate measures to keep away anybody who might be prying. Of course, it's possible, but there's no indication at all that I've seen that. And from the Israeli point of view now, of course, politically it would be something that would be really fraught. I know Israel's coalition governments change pretty frequently. I'm not really sure where they're at right now. And then that brings with it different alignments and attitudes towards Russia. So that's a huge factor.
Yeah, but that would be a good reason to keep it secret, wouldn't it?
Well, put it this way: if they were to be able to, you have to think that from the point of view of the manufacturer of the upgrade, proving it in combat is always a good thing. I mean, even just from a marketing point of view. So that alone, I think, would be something to consider. But it's a big picture.
But those MiG-21s that have had this upgrade, that might be the radars that you couldn't fire the AMRAAM. But could there, in theory, if for some reason this the skepticism of giving the Ukrainians Western aircraft, could there, in theory, be given MiG-21s that could fire the AMRAAM? They're not capable machines in any other way, but that would be a fantastic weapons platform, just to be able to launch that beyond visual range.
Well, again, interesting you mentioned that, because early in the war, about a year ago, there was, among aviation circles, and I know the Drive did an article on this, there was speculation about whether Romania should transfer those upgraded MiG-21s. And to be clear, it's only about 25 aircraft that were upgraded to that multi-mode, multi-role standard. And they were in the process of retiring the last of them when the war started. So I think they've kept about 10 of them operational. Either way, there may be a few of them kicking around. And there was speculation that they might be able to be useful in a number of ways because of the systems that they have on board. I know that the ELTA radar, it was a tight fit in such a small aircraft. ELTA is very good at that, putting a modern radar into a relatively small space. And I know that the range on the ones that they installed was significantly less than what they offer now on that same model radar. So it actually, as I understand it, there's less range than what the Ukrainians have on their MiG-29s and Su-27s. But could it be useful in other ways? Yes, potentially. But those are very tired airframes. Those MiG-21s are over 40 years old. And I know the Romanians were having flyability and safety issues with them.
Yeah, brilliant. But do we know anything about spare parts? Do you have, or just speculating? Do you think this open channel now could increase the flyability of the existing MiG-29 fleet?
Well, there would have been transfer of parts already. We know that from earlier on, pretty early. I think by the spring of last year that was happening. But was it their entire stocks? I doubt it. The Polish Air Force still needed the MiG-29. 2022 was still an important part of their air defense. What's happening now, just on a slight sidebar, is that they are going to be, if it haven't arrived yet, they will be soon, the light fighters that they're buying from South Korea, which are going to replace some of the MiG-29s. So, because I think the F-35s are still a couple of years out. But they have their own air defense that they have to get. I mean, I don't blame the Poles for this over the last year. They actually, I don't really think they were in a position to deliver those aircraft. But are there any other spares? Are there any other, and just as importantly, any more missiles in their inventory? Especially the beyond visual range stuff, the R-27s. Yes, and if they were to get rid of their full fleet now, then that would mean more missiles, maybe everything they have left, going to Ukraine, which would be very important.
Trash Panda.
Good morning, everyone. I remember reading Popular Mechanics, so they consider the source. Quite some time ago, back when I wasn't so in depth into all things military, and I remember reading an article about the Israelis and when they got their hands on